assistant to come up and hand a little product out to everybody. I think we have enough for everybody. Everybody needs their own little Vanna White, I think. And so I told her this morning, she goes, "Are you going to say something when you ask me to come up?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to tell everybody I saw Pat Sajak last night." And I thought, you know what, I need a little assistant. So mine's prettier though. As she's handing these out, I want to tell a story about a guy named David Platt. He is the author of a book called Radical, which is challenging the American dream in the American culture in the American church. Changing ourselves from what the American culture has changed the church to be, from what it's supposed to be. David Platt tells a story about his mission. God called him into the mission field at a young age, and he went and he visited 4 different countries in South Asia, 7 countries in Africa, and there were 15, I think he said his first 6 years in ministry, 5 of them, 51 weeks out of a 52-week year were spent in a foreign country. He spent 1 week in America, and that was Christmas week to visit with his family. He tells a story about when he went to an American church, and this church actually supported his ministry very well. He said they basically supported me. 75% of the financial needs that my ministry needed, or that our mission needed, this church provided. 75% of it. They provided Bibles, they provided tracts. They would mail them, they would send him the money, and when he would show up for, to give a message or whatever, he said that they would hand him a very nice check. And he said that he arrived on a Saturday night. He was supposed to be speaking at this church that Sunday morning, and he arrived Saturday night, and he sat down in the den of the church with the pastor and the deacons. And he sat there and he started talking about his ministry, and he started talking about the mission that God had sent him on. And he said that the pastor looked at him and said, "How are you and your wife doing?" And he said, "We're doing wonderful." He said, "We've actually opened up a new ministry in New Orleans. Every Saturday night for 3 hours, we go out on the streets and we talk to people who," he said, "our goal is to see a person that is within 15 feet of a cardboard box." He said, and we talk to them. We talk to them about Jesus Christ. He said, "We have 3 extra bedrooms in our house." He said, which we're getting wasted away with our own stuff and our own things. He said, so we opened them up and we told them, we said, we can hold 3 people every weekend in our house. They can come and stay in our house. He said, we opened up a ministry for alcoholics and drug addicts. He said, we opened up a ministry for them, to witness to them, to introduce them to Jesus Christ. He started talking about the foreign missions all around the world that God had opened for him and his family to go and spend time with these people to teach them about Christ. And he says that he stopped talking. He said, waiting for the deacons and the pastor to lean forward and start complimenting him on his ministry and joining him in just the extravagance of what the ministry the Lord had opened up. And he said to him, one of the deacons leaned forward, put his hand on his knee, put his hand on David Platt's knee, looked at him and said, "David, I think what you're doing around the world and what your family's doing and your mission that God has sent you on is a fantastic thing. I think it's amazing. It's a beautiful thing." He said, "But if you ask me, God could annihilate those people and send them to hell, and it wouldn't matter to me." David Platt said, you have to read the book, and he said, he looked at the deacon, and he said, all I could think was, you seriously just said that. You seriously let those words just come out of your mouth. The next morning, David showed up at the church to preach, to give a message, and he said the pastor stood up to introduce David, and he said, "David is a wonderful missionary. We've provided money for his missions. We've sent him all over the world, providing money and material things for him to provide for our ministry. So you guys," and he pointed to his congregation, he said, "so you guys don't have to go. So we don't have to do that ourselves." He said, We live in America. We live in the beautiful United States of America. It's such a beautiful, wonderful country filled with wonderful things. And then the pastor looked into his congregation and he said, I would not live anywhere else. I will never live anywhere else but the United States of America. And then the pastor continued to talk and he said to his congregation, we're going to pass around the offering plates. I want you to give good to David, or I'm going to be praying that God sends your children into the mission field. David Platt said, my message that Sunday was on going into all the world and spreading the gospel, becoming a missionary. He said, on the way home, me and my wife discussed how disgusted we were that a Christian, not just a pastor, but a Christian inside that church could actually say something like that. He would never live anywhere else. God could annihilate those people and send them to hell and it wouldn't matter to him. That was the story of David Platt's experience at an American church. Now in our congregation, and I personally found it hard to believe that someone would have the audacity to make a claim such as that. Annihilate those people and send them to hell. But there are seriously people out in this world that do not care at all about the well-being of another human soul. When I read the story, I felt myself becoming really angry. Almost getting butterflies in my stomach at how bad it made me so angry that the deacon could say that. And because I couldn't come to the point to where I could figure out where the guy was coming from. I mean, there's no angle you can look at or look from and see where he got this. Could someone really feel this way about another human being? I'll talk about two teachings that Christ taught us. One, if we hate someone, that's the same as murder. Christ taught us that. Two, He taught us if we lust after a woman or if we lust after a man, we have already committed adultery in our hearts. I began to think about Christ's teachings and how hatred is the same as murder and lust is the same thing as adultery. It's the same thing as cheating. And I began to compare his teaching, Christ's teachings, with what David Platt experienced at the American church. Not in the context of what the deacon said or what the deacon did, but I started writing down a sermon and I started praying about what we are not saying and what we are not doing. God convicted me of a teaching that He wanted me to say this morning, and here it is. If we are not physically helping others to come to know the Lord, if we do not have a passion to seek others in hopes to share the gospel with them, we are making the same statement that the deacon made. This may be hard to comprehend, but I feel that we as a congregation, although we may not make the same blatant statement that the deacon did, we feel the same way. Just think about the teachings that were mentioned. How is it not true? Someone who is not a baseball fan will not care at the end of the season who wins the World Series. Somebody who is not a football fan at the end of the season will not care who wins the Super Bowl. Somebody who is not passionate about spreading the gospel or sharing the gospel with another human being is not going to care about that person's soul or where they end up. It's the same thing. And it becomes easier to comprehend when we put it in this type of context. When I began to prepare the sermon about missions, the first thing that popped into my mind was, Lord, you just not called me into a mission field. God, you've never made it known to me that you want me in a mission or a foreign mission somewhere. But see, the problem with my statement and my thought was not that He's never called me or never commanded me to go, because He's commanded every single person to go. Right. Go ye into all the worlds and spread the gospel with all nations. The problem lies with me and you and everybody who is not heeding to the command of the Lord. We aren't listening for the Lord's commands anymore. We as American Christians are too caught up in building our careers that we believe that those are our callings. A career and a calling and a career and a command from the Lord are two extremely different things.